The situation took a strange turn when all of a sudden, the Emperor ordered the egg to hatch as the melodious sound of the song being played in the background was the perfect opportunity for it to hatch safely. San's heart almost missed a beat when he learned that the egg was going to hatch right there in the Hell Garden. San didn't have the slightest idea about the great demon Emperor's spirit traveling with him. Now that he had ordered the egg to hatch, things couldn't go as planned. He couldn't carry out the moves which he had planned with Ziran. He had to remain cautious at each step to take care of the new life. If he failed to protect it, he would be crippled to death without mercy. Plus, he had not even informed his mates about the egg. What a big mistake he had made. To bring everything back to normal, he called for the boat to be stopped and disported it. When everyone else had gotten off the boat as well, he told them that he had been keeping a secret from them. He revealed everything about the visit to the Crystal Palace. He told them about the egg he received as a token, which was about to hatch at any moment. He told them that he would be going somewhere far from the hustle and bustle of the warm and cold zones to hatch the egg safely. In the meanwhile, the rest of the team members could go to the exit and wait for him there. His friends were shocked at everything. For the first time ever since they had joined the Shrek team, they refused to obey his orders. They didn't agree on going to the exit and leaving San alone. It wasn't free of danger to let him go alone. They collectively made the decision to accompany San to the place where he was going to hatch the egg. San was overwhelmed to see his companions' support, but he was reluctant to take them along since the trip could be highly risky. However, they all said that they wanted to go because San had always shown concern towards them. Thus, it was their turn to return his favor. After a lot of thinking, San eventually agreed to take them along. He was worried for their safety, but then he said that he would try and manage everything. After that, they all boarded the boat again and began traveling, but this time, the boat was directed opposite the exit. San was guiding the way, and Guli had sped up the boat with time change skills. The journey turned out to be a very long one. They traveled for a whole day. There were short breaks after every 2 hours, but the journey was still a very hectic one. On their way, they noticed the cold flowers growing broader and broader. The warm belts were getting smaller and smaller, and some of them were also disrupted in between. They tried moving in the warm zones, but in areas of belt breaks, they had to travel through the cold zones. San used his Liger flame power to open a path between the cold flowers. Though they crossed the danger zone speedily, each of them experienced some degree of spirit and power being drained by the cold flowers. Fortunately, they had cultivated very well in advance, so replenishing their powers wasn't much of an issue for them. During their journey, they crossed the 3 cold flower belts. As they passed beyond the third one, the second song sounded. The warm flower belts, which were already very narrow, grew even narrower. There was enough space for their boat to just move forward. San was extremely worried about the surroundings. He had brought along his entire team. If anything bad happened to them, he would regret his decision for his entire life. He nervously asked the spirit of the great emperor if they still had to travel ahead, to which he replied that there was yet some distance to be traveled. San's worry couldn't be calmed. He requested the emperor to ensure their safe return to the exit. The emperor had promised to do so, but San didn't fully trust him. He had prepared himself for the worst-case scenarios. If they faced anything adverse, he was ready to give up the mission and put his life at stake just to save his friends' lives. He kept moving forward on the condition of retreating as soon as they faced any adversity. Soon, the third song sounded. The cold zones were growing at a very swift pace. The warm zones had immensely shrunken. The boat had to travel through cold flowers every 1,000 meters. All of a sudden, San shouted out loud and ordered Bingji to stop the boat immediately. He had been using his perception to navigate the warm zones. From that point onwards, he couldn't see any safe zones till thousands of meters ahead. There was intense darkness, bad luck, and evilness in front of him. He instructed his companions to wait for him in the warm belt while he went ahead alone with the egg. Bingji was reluctant to send him alone, but San assured him that he would be safe. He promised them that he wouldn't risk his life for the sake of that mission. If he met a point where going further could pose a danger to his life, he said that he would retreat immediately. He told them to wait for him till the sound of the next song. If he had not gotten back by then he would catch up with them later, and they should have gone to the exit. With that, he jumped into the sea of cold flowers. He used the golden Liger flame to make way for him. Now that he was alone, his energy consumption was reduced to a great extent as he had reduced the protective range of the flame. He didn't use any sort of teleportation or any other shortcut. He straight away ran through the cold flowers to minimize the use of energy. The deeper he progressed into the danger zone, the more cold flowers there were. He was consuming energy for 2 things, for moving forward and for fighting the bad luck of the cold flowers. He kept on running at the same pace for almost 2 hours, after which he got extremely exhausted. He just couldn't force himself to move any further. He conversed with the spirit of the emperor that his limit was reached, and he could not move ahead. At that moment, the spiritual energy radiating from the egg began growing. It grew into long bands and wrapped around San's arms. They radiated blue-silver energy and turned into blue-silver grass. Slowly, the bands wrapped around his entire body. San was befuddled as he couldn't move his arms and feet. He asked the Emperor what it was all about. A while later, he realized that the cold flowers around him were no longer harming him. They had lost the ability to attack him. The spiritual aura had blended with the bad luck of the flowers and had neutralized it. It wasn't making sense at all. What could it be? Could it be assimilation? It indeed was assimilation. The crystal great demon emperor was omnipotent. The blue-silver grass assimilated with the cold flowers. The drainage of his energy and life aura had also stopped. He wondered why that energy had not appeared earlier. Since the suction pull from the ground had disappeared too, he could fly now. He summoned his spiritual radiant wings and flew over the cold zone toward the source of the song. The blue-silver energy bands expanded and wrapped around the wings too. Flying was never that fun ever before. His speed of traveling over the cold flowers was so much faster than when he was running over them. Because the flowers weren't attacking him, he didn't have to use the golden ligger flame anymore. It took him an hour to travel a distance greater than what it took him 2 hours to do so earlier. Soon, he had arrived at the source of the sound. He couldn't believe that he arrived so early. The source of the sound was something very different from what he had imagined. It wasn't any black hole of anything. It was a very magnificent, beautiful, and charming white flower. It was so huge that the ripples caused by its movement could spread out through the entire Hell Garden. The flower was protected by a bubbled shield around it. San stepped closer to it and touched the shield. As soon as he touched it, he could feel a sense of rejuvenation move around his body. He felt a very strong force of life. All the fatigue had vanished within a second. In relation to the Hell Garden with all the bad luck and evilness, the white flower alone could serve as a heaven garden. He took out the egg and held it closer to the shield so that it could absorb its life energy. It absorbed quite a lot of it, but it seemed as if there was no end to the energy. Soon he realized that the white flower wasn't radiating only life energy. It was a vast reserve of the Heavenly Fox's luck too. The imprint of the Heavenly Fox's transformation in his body evolved as it was nourished by luck. If he had known that before, he would have brought Dubai along because he had experienced the Heavenly Fox Mountain too. His cultivation would have improved to a great extent as well. Staying around the majestic white flower was so calm and peaceful. He wanted to get more of the coziness, so he flew up to the top of the shield. The comfort was increasing more and more as he flew nearer to the surface of the white flower. The Heavenly Fox energy that he had absorbed back on the mountain had turned into an illusion of an actual fox. San was unaware of a mighty spiritual fox growing larger and larger behind his back. All of a sudden, the fox snatched the divine consciousness out of the egg. Though San couldn't visualize the Heavenly Fox, he felt a sudden change when the divinity was taken away. The voice of the crystal great demon emperor started becoming feeble and then vanished completely. He knew that the emperor was no longer watching him. What a great relief it was to not be watched. San continued to fly higher and higher until he reached the top of the shield. From that point onwards, there was no shield. The white flower was accessible to him. He wanted to experience the aura inside the shield, so he jumped inside. Landing on one of the biggest petals of the flower, he sensed that the energy was several times stronger than on the outside. It rushed into his veins like a spring from the ocean. The energy was so strong and nourishing that it enlightened all the bloodlines moving in San's body. His cultivation level had reached the peak of 8th rank. The Liger transformation had also evolved to the peak of the 8th tribulation. Other than the Liger bloodline, the rest of them were trying to evolve up to the peak too. It was a golden opportunity for him to improve all his bloodlines. He could take his energy reserves to the maximum. To make good use of the energy, he placed the egg down to free his entire body. As he peacefully stood to infuse maximum power, the song started sounding again. He could hear it much clearer than before as he was standing on top of the source through which it originated. By virtue of the melodious song, the energy around him became much more intense. He felt a materialized touch as it flew past him. Not only that, but he also noticed a strange change in the environment. His surroundings were filled with some uniquely luminous stones whirling around an axis. San knew very well that those stones were the lucky stones. They had a huge quantity of good luck infused into them. He was so sure about it because he felt the same, while being surrounded by them as he felt at the Heavenly Fox Mountain. His attention was diverted all of a sudden by a crackling sound. As he looked down towards the egg, he saw that it was beginning to hatch. He didn't expect it so early. To witness the hatching properly, he sat down by the egg and watched it eagerly. He was immensely surprised to see something like a human hand coming out of the egg. At first, he thought he was mistaken, but when the shell crackled further, he could see his apprehension becoming true. It indeed was a human coming out of the egg. It was a small baby girl. She was so cute. Her eyes were sparkling with innocence. There was no chance of her being non-human, but it was strange to see her being birthed by eggs. Keeping the bizarreness in his mind, he wasn't ready to believe what he saw. Perhaps that baby was a descendant of the Crystal Great Demon Emperor. There was no way for humans to be born from eggs. It could only be explained if one of the parents was a human and the other was non-human. If that baby girl was really a descendant of the Great Demon Emperor, then her mother must be a human. If that didn't make sense, then the other scenario could be that the Crystal Great Demon Emperor wasn't a male. It was a female dragon. Well, that didn't make sense to San too, because he had seen the Emperor himself. He was definitely a man. The situation was getting him so confused that he didn't bother thinking about it anymore. He blew off the matter by saying that it might be some secret of the Emperor. Getting over the thoughts, he looked down at the egg and found out that the baby girl had matured enough that she could sit on her own. Now, that was something highly strange. It wasn't normal for a human baby. He got even more worried as he saw the baby continuously growing. Her growth was visible to the naked eye. Within just a few seconds, she had grown up to appear as a 6-year-old child. What could the mystery be? The situation kept on getting out of control as the girl began talking a few minutes later. She referred to San as Dad and leaped onto him to hug him. San had no idea what was going on with him. He couldn't understand anything. However, because the baby was a human, and the Emperor had tasked him to look after her, he had to do something about it. He draped her in a loose cloth arbitrarily stitched into a shirt. That was all he had at that moment to dress her. Because the girl began talking just after being born, he asked her about her name. She was silent, probably because she wasn't named yet. San decided to call her Jing Jing because she was born from an egg. The girl was happy to get a name. She got so attached to San within the previous few minutes that she couldn't resist herself thinking of him as her father. San explained to her that he wasn't her father. After taking care of the necessary things, he returned to absorbing the energy. This time, he had little Jing in his arms too. He tried not to be disturbed by her presence and focused on the lotus pod. There was still a bloodline that he had not yet transformed to the peak of level 8, so he wanted to get done with it before the song stopped. It was a pity that he was so unlucky. As soon as he focused on the pod, the song stopped. The energy around him weakened. He had failed to get the most out of the intense energy. Anyhow, he had stayed on the flower for too long and it was time to leave. If he stayed there further, he was afraid that the assimilation of the flowers might disappear. He held Jing in his arms and flew out of the white flower shield. Outside the white flower zone, all the flowers were cold. He wanted to make sure the assimilation effect was still there, so he swooshed a blade of blue-silver grass to see the reaction. He was happy to know that the effect was still there, as the energy of the grass had intermingled with that of the cold flowers. Little did he know that the major problem wasn't about the assimilation. As he tried to fly over the cold zone, he realized that he couldn't move his body at all. He was stuck at the same spot. Out of the blue, he saw dense black fumes approaching him from the cold zone. The fumes represented bad luck. As it grew closer, the good luck from within his body began clashing with it. It seemed as if both the lucks were using his body as a medium for competing with each other. Both the opposite powers clashed and collided fiercely inside his body. San knew that he had made a huge mistake of waiting and testing the assimilation of the cold flowers. If he had rushed outside immediately, then the two energies would not have gotten enough time to clash.